He speaks flawless English, of course. And anyway, he eventually got elected president of Georgia. The Rose Revolution, he took over. He pushed out Edvard Shevardnadze, the communist apparatchik who taken over Georgia about 1993, who was running it largely as a satrapy of Muscovy. So Saakashvili made it genuinely independent and decided that Georgia would plow its own furrow and wouldn't be, in the shadow of Russia as it had for 2 centuries. Really downgraded the Russian language. Most of the Russian ethnic minority had departed by that time. So what else about Saakashvili? Was a liberal, was a reformer, and so on. And decided to stand up to Russia and was unabashedly pro-Western, partly because he studied in the United States and he had married to that Dutch lady with whom he's got children. So really to root out corruption. And public sector salaries were abysmal, and so there was a lot of graft. So people were open to douceur because it was the only way to make ends meet. So he increased police salaries tenfold, and there was to be no more defalcation. It was a bit difficult to de-oligarchize Georgia, and he really emphasized learning foreign languages, particularly English, because nobody else speaks Georgian. It's got a sui generis alphabet, and yes, everybody can speak Russian too, even if not fluently. But got native speaker teachers, often very badly paid, from Anglophone countries, or even Denmark. I met a Dane teaching English there, for people speaking Spanish, learning Spanish, German, French, whatever. And really opened it up to tourists, said you can come almost any nationality, even South Africans can go there for 365 days without a visa. Very welcoming to nomads, digital nomads, working online as an accountant, as a PA, as a translator, whatever. And made sure it had an excellent tourist industry, because they got like no oil, no gas, no coal, almost no metals. It's quite mountainous, it's not very fertile. Really, it's got no mineral resources. So it's just not lucky in that kind of way. It's got Russia to the north, it's got the Black Sea to the west, it's got Azerbaijan to the east, and it's got Armenia to the south, and indeed Turkey. So obviously Russia was illegally occupying the Georgian regions of South Ossetia and Abkhazia from the early 90s, long before Saakashvili became president. Nothing you can do about that. There are 5 million Georgians, and back then there were like 140 million Russians. So there's no way they could defeat this nuclear power and just hold them off. But in 2008, because of his temerity to try and make it a free country with free and fair elections and an independent judiciary and so on, Russia invaded. So they're supposed peacekeepers illegally occupying these 2 regions, and invaded more of Georgia. There's about a 10-day conflict. Georgia kind of came off the worst of where. Russia didn't advance that much. It wasn't actually that easy for Russia, considering their enormous numerical advantage. It was shortly after Dmitry Medvedev had become president. There was this view that he was less hubristic and aggressive than Putin. But, within a few months of his inauguration, within 3 months, he proved that to be a lie. It was also breaking the Olympic truce. And Russia seems to care so much about the Olympics, which are the Beijing Olympics. So had it been foolish, should he have backed down more? But anyway, it wasn't a calamity for Georgia. Georgia could have been wiped out. But Russia was quite limited in what it did, which led some people, including myself, to the incorrect supposition that this war against Ukraine, Russia's goals were more discreet. Because Russia could have taken the whole of Georgia quite easily, but perhaps they've been feeling about the pushback at that time. They hadn't rearmed that much. But anyway, he forged a very cordial relationship with the United States. The Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, visited in 2012. But Saakashvili, he was ousted sometimes later. He had got very high poll ratings. He'd won like saying 90% of the vote in an election. Now, obviously, he wasn't perfect. I'm not saying there was no corruption whatsoever. Some people say that there was some personation in voting. But he was out of office. He later moved to Ukraine, where he became a Ukrainian citizen, acquired mastery of the language, was even elected a regional governor. But some years later, he returned to Georgia, where he was arrested, tried with various crimes, found guilty of various crimes, and he's been incarcerated for a few years. But he's obviously in a very bad way, and videos have been released. So in 2021, he went back. He'd been out of the country since 2013. Anyway, so the president, Salome Zurabishvili, said she shan't ever pardon him. She's a French Georgian. So he's on a hunger strike at what happened to him, said he's not been given a fair trial. Anyway, so he's been in a prison hospital and things like that. So tens of thousands of people have been protesting for its release for a couple of years now. So there's the United National Movement, which is behind him. So Amnesty International has said that he's been on hunger strike for a long time. Now I know that's damaging his own health, but he's clearly not dangerous. I thought they could do like the United Kingdom used to have a prisoner's temporary discharge of ill health act to release him and then imprison him again to serve the remainder of his sentence. But anyway, he's got a lot of virtues. Okay, if he was convicted of a crime and a fair trial, he must pay the penalty. But he's already suffered a fairly significant penalty. So anyway, there have been some independent doctors who have castigated his treatment, saying he's been held in inhumane treatment. So remember, he is a Ukrainian citizen. So President Zelensky is speaking up for him, but not too vociferously. He doesn't want to irk Georgia. The other thing is Saakashvili was an ally of Petroshenko, who was Zelensky's opponent in the last election. And it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that Poroshenko might win the next election. At the moment, it looks unlikely, though. So anyway, he's in a Gori military hospital. He wants to go to a civilian hospital. Anyway, so he's clearly very ill. It would be very bad news if he was to die there. He's very, very divisive for Georgian politics. So there are all sorts of things that people accused him of mishandling large-scale demonstrations when he was president, that these police used excessive force and things like that, that some of his political opponents were beaten up. I don't think anyone ever claims he's killed anyone, apart from obviously when Georgia was fighting in defense of its sovereign territory. But anyway, he's done a lot of good, and I think he should be freed. And they say that those in government in Georgia now are too pro-Moscow. I think that shouldn't be overstated, but obviously Georgia's got actually a fairly decent relationship with Russia, all things considered, because over 100,000 Russian refugees have fled there trying to evade the draft. That's brought a lot of money into Georgia. The Georgian economy has grown 10% this year, which is incredible. So they're very happy with that, and they don't want to queer the pitch with Russia by being too kind to Saakashvili by releasing him. Now, as a Ukrainian citizen, could be sent to Ukraine. His wife is Dutch. Presumably, he'd be allowed to live in the Netherlands with her. So I would like to see him set free. Now, even if it's not permanent, even if it's just while he recovers his health, under house arrest, some humanity, surely. Because it would not be a good look for Georgia if he died in hospital. And all right, if you go on hunger strike, that's self-inflicted suffering. But he is quite ill. And as I say, I don't think anyone says he's a danger to the public. Prisoners for people who are those who jeopardize others, really. Right, anyway, thank you so much for watching my channel. So please subscribe on Patreon, donate on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. I do look forward to visiting Saakashvili again, as in Georgia. Unfortunately, I'm unable to speak the Georgian language, but I warmly recommend it to you as a tourist destination. It's a superb cuisine, wine and architecture, merriment, music. They're known to be great songsters, the Georgian people. All right, goodbye, everyone.